volume.
1, 2.
Not change the volume.
You'll never see me posing for a photo. The flash bulbs got me washed out. Digital
Ladies and gentlemen,
stills
welcome back to the
everywhere.
Conspiracy Randy podcast, Shady Hotel Edition. No Andy today.
No Andy.
Guys, I don't know if we've talked about John for a long time, but I'm joined by special guest John Fairbanks today. How's it going, John?
It's glorious.
John and I go way back. We've worked together for 4 years, give or take, on
Yeah.
a bunch of stuff. Now we work on a bunch of other projects for other people. But we were having a conversation the other day in one of our calls, which starts diverting into conspiracy things that aren't very productive.
It seems like that it's happening more and more
Yeah.
as you all spiral further into madness.
Well, yes. Yeah. I think, though. So, anyway, what happened was we started talking about this stuff. Little background. John you're born and raised Mormon.
Right.
Correct?
Yeah.
So that's thing one we're going to get into with this is some of the things that we were talking about amidst this conversation. I was telling John about some of the, like, old world, like possibly like alternative history stuff, which I think the average person would actually describe Mormon's version of history as a alternate or false version of history too, right? You know what I mean? Like the average American version of history is not probably what the Mormons would cover.
Well, no, like, so the history, so yes.
Of all
One,
of it, you know what I mean?
it's always interesting to ever lead in any conversation, be like, so this person was raised this particular religion.
Yeah.
But it's the one thing that's interesting about Mormons is that it's like one of the only, outside of Scientology,
Yeah.
it's one of the only, like, all-American religions.
Which is why it's the best.
Obviously.
Listen, we're bringing it back. We're bringing it back. I don't
Which is
fucking
why
around
we're
here.
drinking beer and
We're bringing
enjoying-
it back.
Right.
Um,
But yeah, no. But your question was history,
Yeah.
and Mormon history are two. They're very much at odds. So if you talk about like American history, turn of the century, you gotta remember like, so not to dive too deep into it, but it's like the Mormons. My family, their attitude towards like American history and their love for their government is only like one generation of like, yeah, the government, they're good.
Yeah.
Like we like them.
Everyone else is like, these are the enemy.
Because they
And
left.
Our version is the truth.
Because Mormons straight up got out of Dodge.
So the more I looked into this and I started explaining this to John, I was like, I think my curiosity and like I want to throw away mentally my current understanding from school of what American history is. Specifically, like literally like the founding of the country, who was here, who came here first, like all this stuff. Like
Right.
I want to start over for me. I'm like, all right, what do I think? What can I look into? What's interesting to look into? Because, by the way, knowing the version that was told to me in school never fucking helped. Jesus Christ. My chair broke. Never fucking helped me in any way in my life anyway.
No.
You know what I mean? It's not ever like, well, you know, on 1492, Columbus sailed the ocean blue.
Obviously.
Bingo!
Right.
Who wants to be a millionaire? It never works that way for me. So, like, that never served me very well. So in this case, like, what's the harm in being like, let me just try to find my own understanding and look at things that are interesting. And I started looking into the Mormon stuff, and it was really, really fucking cool. As far as, so I want to zoom back. We're just going to dive in. Let's
Yeah.
go. I've talked on the show, and it's a concept that frustrates me. I like to call it like old world alternative history, right? And looking at the old world, specifically the 1800s, but most likely these are I think the 1800s, early, mid, late 1800s is very, very interesting, right? And there's a lot of things that the Mormons believe that kind of went on during that time that fit into this. And one of the things about this old world theory, you know, some will call it Tartaria or whatever, but it's that there used to be one or many ancient, very advanced civilizations.
Sure.
And that whatever has gone on, whoever took over, whoever won, or whatever is left of it, has chosen to cover it up. And that doesn't mean fuck all. I don't care whether, you know what I mean? It doesn't. I'm not here like, oh, I need to find the truth. It's just not my thing. But it's so interesting to look into things like the idea that we found a lot of very advanced buildings or found a lot of abandoned colossal architecture as a culture as we moved west. And as I look into the Mormon stuff, I was talking to John, I was like, this is really, and it was almost kind of like the first you had probably heard of the conspiracy or like old world cover-up side of that thing.
The facts are that when it comes to conspiracy theories, Randy is my go-to conspiracy theory podcast.
Oh, we're that's the wrong place.
But the fact is that I haven't been exposed to a lot of them. So because my exposure's low, what I've appreciated so far is like obviously working with you guys and Andy and helping on the outside of things, but also being a fan. Is that you really introduce and then let us go wander. We can go wander, right?
Go mess with it. Yeah.
And so definitely when you introduced this idea of I couldn't tell you what mud flood was. I couldn't tell, but after we talked about it, off I went, and I'm like, all right. So I can kind of see.
Yeah.
But no, so and definitely that's not what gets discussed. That's not what the Mormon history is either.
The Mormon history, I think, is almost a part. So the way I looked at this is we started looking through some of these Mormon, what do you call them, settlements, right?
Right.
As you look into them across the way, like these are buildings that are. I'm sorry, as a man I did construction and building commercial buildings, things like this for over a decade. And I just have a really hard time nowadays. Like I look at, and then there's some cities I've been in the world where I see things that were built in the 1800s, and specifically the mid 1800s, where you're like, oh, these guys did this with fucking horses and dirt fucking roads. Are you fucking serious? You look at like and so there's a lot of the people who subscribe to this theory that believe that like we found that stuff. Right. That was there for 200-300 years. Some will even go as far as say it was only one civilization that was across the way. I don't like trying to have some big unified theory as though like that's why they say Tartaria. It's like, well, the Tartarian civilization that's on the maps is very much like Eastern Europe, a Russia, Mongolia type area that I think it's foolish to be like it was them. Just because now that's not on maps. I think it's better like to just assume that there may be many different advanced civilizations, that human life, technological advancements can be cyclical, you know. But either way, it looked to me as the way the Mormon thing went, like what was like in Salt Lake City, the big fucking thing there, they were talking. The Mormons are known for their buildings and structures that go very deep underground.
Right.
Like sometimes 4, 5, 6, 7 stories below ground.
Yeah.
Which then, when you look at one of the theories as to why these civilizations are no more, is that there was like a mud flood, or some will say soil liquefaction, where if you vibrate a bunch of sand and there's water below, like the aquifer, and then you have sand, dirt above, and you just stick a fucking dildo in it or whatever vibrating tool you do, and then what happens is everything becomes cohesive and liquid, and if you have buildings under settles in. Yeah. And so that's one of the theories with mud flood, or that it actually is an expansion of the biblical flood.
Sure.
Right? That's also the thing, that the biblical flood maybe isn't a thing that happened one time, that's a thing that's cyclical.
Well, okay, so a little bit of like my background we established on Mormonism, but also so I got my degree in history. So I got my bachelor's in history, and then I stayed in education.
So you come out of like Mormon's version of history, and then you're like, now I'm doing the government's version of history.
Totally. Yeah. And the one thing that was, went to public college, right? So everything but the reality is when you look at, if you want to look at like, so the one thing that was interesting about the Mormons was that you're so religious.
Yeah.
And it's a little bit like Judaism in a sense that Mormonism is not, when you're raised in it, it's your dentist is Mormon. Yeah. Your doctor that you go to is Mormon. The people you see on Wednesday nights, that activity, that's Mormons. So
I don't even know, is it about insulating, or is just like the community?
It's community, man. Community. The one thing that the Mormon church does so well, the fact is, how many Mormon people have you met? Do you know?
A lot.
Are they just giant raging assholes?
No, they're all the best.
They're literally the nicest people. Yeah. And listen, South Park, right? They write that into the show. Yeah. Their episode is called All About the Mormons, where they just shit all over about the first vision, about how Joseph Smith, who founded the religion, the story of him finding the golden plates and creating the Book of Mormon, right? The whole thing is like they do flashbacks or whatever, but it's all basing off of this little kid that's just moved to town. And the kid's just super nice, and the family is super nice, and all our characters, Stan and Eric and everybody, whatever, they want to shit on this kid for being super religious.
Solely for like what they believe.
Exactly.
Which is a thing that goes on a lot now. This we talked about a lot on the show, and I was like, this person just believes because of whatever they've been told by their parents or their fucking higher power belief structure, whatever, that like this is the way that it is. And then the average person who interacts with this guy is like, oh, I love this guy. He's super nice. It's like,
Right.
have you heard what he believes?
And that's where things get wiry. And obviously, like the Mormons, they're always theyey're selling you something, so they are going to go door to door. Like there's
Never
those
really
pieces.
try to fucking convert a guy like me. I don't.
No, but that's where it's they're always going to be. But the community is what they do. So that's where that insulation comes from. But that's where the sensation very much is that it's not as far as where Judaism, where it's like it's their literal like race and idea, but it's close.
Yeah.
For Mormons, it's very much like it's what I am, it's who I am. It's not just religion.
Yeah.
And so because of that, they're so ingrainedly, it's so much in their fiber.
Yeah. So, on the history side of things, so to boil, I want to boil out of this a lot of the like specificity that comes with a lot of these like it was Tartaria, and then it was either melt or mud flood or whatever.
Right.
So if I like extract like the larger concept of this is that civilization maybe was more advanced, and maybe we didn't build these buildings when you thought you were. Maybe us flunkies, descendants or our ancestors who hopped on some fucking train and just headed west, just kind of stumbled into these big, you call it ruins. You know, you look at some of the only pictures you're ever going to see of these things are under construction. Might be one photo and the building's like 80% done.
Right.
But oftentimes there's evidence of huge amounts of wear, huge amounts of aging, like blackening and weathering, in an area that's just desolate around there, like completely churned up roads, or what truthfully looks like a mud flood. You know, so it's really interesting when you start looking at the photographic evidence. There's a lot of bad conclusions made from these photographic evidence that I hate, where someone will take a picture of like, I don't know, some city, and they'll be like, see, there's no people. Where's all the people? And I was like, well,
Yeah.
like, it's fucking might be 7 a.m. on a Sunday. You know what I mean? Like
Right.
What are we talking about? This is a photo. Like, it's a 200-year photo. What are we doing?
Oh, and I got lost. It was, so the point of me bringing up the history teacher side of things was the idea where you talked about the flood.
Yeah.
Well, the fact is that if you look at, and I was tying it all back together. So Mormons are highly religious, but you end up being highly educated because your religion doesn't sit in the mainstream. So you not only get knowledge, and you spend a lot of time learning about Old Testament, which is your normal your Old Testament, which is Jews, right? New Testament, which is Christians. Well, you got like 3 other books for Mormons.
Yeah.
We spent a lot of time thinking about the Book of Mormon, but we got more. So you end up becoming this expert across all religions because you also get used to people attacking you for your religion being stupid.
Yeah.
So you have to justify it.
Which, by the way, I think the attacks are often still, my opinion, is still on the history and the Joseph Smith thing more than like the belief structure.
Most people
always.
don't even know. Like, the odds are, if you rate, like where I
If
grew up,
South Park never did anything, nobody would know anything about what Mormons believe.
Or
That's my
whatever
truth in my generation.
or whatever comes out of the pulpit at your current church.
Yeah.
So where I grew up, we had a lot of born again Christians that were at some of the mega churches, and it was active where their pastors and folks from the pulpit would talk about how evil Mormons were.
It's like hit pieces.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it's weird.
And
right?
the reason why is because the Revelation. So if you go into the book of Revelations, right, one of the last things that's said in the book of Revelations is any book that comes after this book is of the devil. Now, fucking forget anything about the fact that Revelations wasn't the last book that was actually written when everything got compiled, right? It was written like, wait, so we're not going to ignore that. But what ends up happening is that's what gets taught. So folks that don't know anything about Mormons already have like, oh,
There's walls up.
they're evil.
Yeah.
Like, you guys are idiots. But the point I was saying was, because you're so surrounded by religion, one of the things that I learned, because this eventually what caused me to leave and not be an active member of the Mormon Church, was because history and reality don't mesh.
Yeah.
But the fact, when you look at all those floods, the great flood that happens in the Bible, you hear this story in every culture. Mm-hmm. So in the Mayan culture and in Latin America, they have a great flood that happened. Every one of them have separate great floods, or
and
many.
almost always, what is the concept? Then repopulated by few,
Right.
That are coming in, just putting together the pieces. I gotta double check something.
Yep.
Still
My
recording.
usual
Curse. We're
Yeah,
still
that's all
recording.
right.
Listen, whatever.
Listen, you saw my eyes come down here of like checking
we
like
know
audio.
the deal. But I think, the flood thing is very interesting to me because then again, like, so after that moment, what happens, right? So you have these people, and so when you look into, I encourage everybody to look into like the orphan trains of the mid 1800s and the baby incubators. Why in the world are there at World's Fairs and county fairs and like circuses, there's baby incubators. You look them up with fucking tons of babies in incubators. Why? It's almost as though there was and this is obviously like a fucking retarded conclusion, but that's the steps that are drawn, like that there was a concerted effort to repopulate.
So a Mormon spin.
What do Mormons do?
So a Mormon
they
spin.
repopulate intensely.
Big time. And one cool thing is super cool because God, it gives you so much purpose as a Mormon, because it's the idea of where we're taught that there are you have future children that are waiting for you. That chose to be, you were chosen to be their parents.
Yeah.
So they are waiting for you in what we call the pre-existence.
You got to be getting them loads in there.
You have to be laying dick because you have all these kids that are waiting. And it's like, if you don't have more babies, then maybe you have babies on the other side that never had a chance to get here.
And listen, honey, if you're not into it, somebody... That's really funny. But listen, babe, listen, honey, I don't know. Just as you're pregnant, and I feel like there's more babies. Like, I feel like I would have like 35 women.
What do you think the Mormons did?
See,
Tyler?
I mean, that's it. I'm about to get sold on this, guys. What are you?
Now, there's some folks out in Texas that's still doing this, and in Mexico.
Well, I will tell you this. I explain this. Don't explain this to me, but somebody. I want you to, like, logically speaking. Why is polygamy? Now I get it. If we boil it down, what is the execution of this is often like somehow somebody's being manipulative. Someone ends up fucking kids or whatever goes on with these, you know, in general. But like in concept, as far as like, why can I have 7 girlfriends and can we all have kids and live together? Yes. Mm-hmm. I just can't like, so like the idea that polygamy is a crime, and I'm like, well, just stop trying to legally marry these broads and just keep doing the thing, right? That seems strange to me.
Right.
Like, but it is wild that there is like some social hit pieces for somebody in consenting relationships with adults. Now it's whatever. You get further down the road, and obviously like there's a lot of things that you see where you're like, all right, this probably is a little weird.
You realize that polygamy is not off the books for Mormons.
No, it shouldn't be.
It isn't.
Should be off the book. This is what I'm saying. Though, like it's against the law, and I don't understand why the government was like, no.
And I don't know either. What I looked into, like I spent a lot of time.
You know what I think? Weak ass dudes who can't provide for women be like, this guy's got all this money, and he's got like he's taking care of 7 women, 25 kids, and he's like, I'm over here as like a gas station clerk, like I couldn't take care of one. And then they're just like, it's like, and then there's no chicks around. Like socially, it's just like an engineering problem. Mm-hmm. It's like a distribution problem. Like, well, there's just not enough to go around.
They're gobbling up all the chicks.
And then the dudes who suck pretty loudly and tend to make laws, is the way I look at it, and that's usually how it goes.
That's pretty good.
Yeah, quote me.
Quote me. So one of the things that got talked about a lot is, why did polygamy start? So that Mormon history is an interesting one. So
you can only make babies 9 months at a time.
Right. Well, for sure. So, but it was what always got told to us growing up was, well, the wars. The problem was men left for war.
Yeah.
And the men died. So you had all these women who couldn't own land, and they needed to be able to have a dutiful husband that could take them in and take care of them. And so there was too many women, not enough men. So the men had to sacrifice and take on multiple wives. Yeah. And so that's the history, right? Jesus. That's what gets sold. And so couple that with when Mormons came in, there wasn't a lot, but they would swarm. And just like I said, like your Mormon's your dentist. The Mormon is the banker you go to, is whatever. So when they came to new cities.
And I suppose as an outsider, you're like, this is an invasion.
That was it. Yeah. So Missouri.
This is like what the left did with universities. This is what they claim when a culture moves in. This is like, oh, well now did you see the new blank?
All those Mormons have shown up, and they're taking over the neighborhood.
Yeah. Property values have gone to shit.
And so what happens is you have those folks that were in these towns.
There's a bunch of people not drinking and breaking things, and taking nice care of their properties, and letting families play outside, and
just trying to teach the kids how to play the guitar, and everyone has to learn how to play piano. So you had all these cultures. What you ended up having happen is these cities all these folks would come in, and then the Mormons would only do business with each other. And so it caused massive animosity amongst locals. Yeah. And so that's where, like, the Mormon Execution Act, one of them, in Missouri passes a law that allows you to kill Mormons legally, backed by the U.S.
Now,
government.
is that like a free-for-all, or do you have to like apply for tags like deer?
Mormon tags.
You're like, all right, I have to kill 3 Mormons in Brown County this year.
But if you catch one and they're not over 150 pounds, you have to release it back into the wild.
Is it like they don't really call them male or female? They call them antler or antlerless, like with deer. It's like this one has a dick, this one does not.
Dick or dickless.
Because the truth is, deer tags have been the most gender-neutral thing ever. It's not called male or female or bucks or whatever. It's antlerless. It's female. This is the go around for the whole trans thing. It's all we got to do is be like, with or without penis. Okay, that's all we need to know.
Got it. That's all.
However else, that's not what I'm asking you.
Yep.
You got a penis? We're good.
Do you have
this
magic?
This is a penis question.
Do you have magic underpants?
This is not a gender question. It's a penis. Is there a penis?
Yeah.
That's all I'm asking. Then we're good. I won't infer anything. Anyway, whatever. I derailed.
For sure.
But this is, I think the found civilization and the reset stuff is so interesting to me. Because it seems to me like the Mormons had commandeered some of those properties, communities, absolutely. Because you've even seen it in your Mormon history lookings, is like there's properties where they don't say when a place was built or how long it takes. And you look into this, when you look into the Old World or the Tartaria stuff or the Lost Civilization stuff, specifically in America is where it's interesting. Because it's the stuff that's closest to me. Europe, there's a ton of that type of shit. But I understand the version of American history I was taught. And I see where this one rubs, and I see the holes. And it is super cool when you start looking into the old mental asylums and shit, old insane asylums and shit that were put up that would house 5,000, 10,000 people in a town with fucking 2,000 people.
3,000 people.
And that was built in a year. Or so many of them say nothing, and there's no record about the construction time.
Just open.
And it just says, like, and they'll even use word like took occupancy.
Right.
And it's almost like this workaround, because you can't say built, because if you say the word built, that asks a question. That is the answer to a question, which means, okay, when was this built? Or it can posit a question. When was it built? How long did it take to build? And they don't have any of those answers. Therefore, they say, we occupied this as a mental hospital on this day. And all of that shit, mid-1800s, until World's Fairs in the late 1800s, early 1900s.
Right.
And then what happened is, during this era, you will see one of two things. Now, this, of course, can be explained other ways. But you see, one, the World's Fairs were supposedly huge, grand things built in Chicago, Seattle, St. Louis. Look into all of these World Fairs. They're incredible, but huge, epic construction stuff. Now, they claimed it was like, oh, they just used this like new, cheap way to make it. But these things are of a scale that I don't think people understand.
Yeah, like cities.
Cities, and as beautiful as some of the most epic courtyards in these major cities in Europe, in Chicago, St. Louis. Like it was really beautiful to see. But the theory is that those World's Fairs were made as a way to almost finish some of the construction that was ruined. So they're building it. People had just occupied it 50 years ago.
Right.
40 years ago, 30 years ago. And then they come in and pretty much they spend a year or however long the World's Fair is, and like tons of people come and see it, and there's all these great displays. And then they tear them down.
Yeah.
And the claim is those were temporary structures. But now we had the World's Fair in case there was any pictures, right? If there was ever any pictures that went on. Now that we have the World's Fair, oh, that's what all that shit was for. And now it's gone. It's gone. And now that's the explanation that closes the book. And the World's Fairs were very good for that, is that it was just a way to close the book on those projects, essentially. And now everyone in that generation will remember the World's Fair, and they're going to, oh yeah, they made the thing, and now they tore them all down and they went away. The other thing that went on to make some of these structures disappear, and I'm talking about this strictly from an architectural standpoint, right? First, right?
Right.
These big grand structures that made a lot of these disappears in these cities is almost every major city in the U.S., and I think there was another one on Toronto, was another one, had massive fires that almost destroyed the entire city.
How often did that happen?
Everywhere during this era.
San Francisco.
And now, of course, the explanation, which maybe is probably right, is that like you have cities of that size and scale are new. You have new building materials. You're new in electricity. You still have some fire as like. So I get it. In proximity, certainly a fire can. But San Francisco is one of the most interesting ones too. That if you look up original drawings from the harbor when San Francisco first got settled by the fucking gold rush folks,
Right.
This drawing is of this nearly empty place, right? It's just a bunch of poor motherfuckers coming to go dig and try to strike gold.
Mm-hmm.
And then 2 years later, there is hundreds and thousands of structures that are epically huge, like massively huge. And then also so many buildings for as far as the eye can see in like 2-3 years. And these people are fucking gold diggers who came off like, like just getting there was a challenge.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, what is and by the way, the second one I'm talking about, the full one, that's a photograph. Those are actually photographs.
Right.
So it's really, really, I don't know. And of course, it doesn't fucking mean anything. Like, this isn't evidence. This isn't proof. This is just like an interesting concept for me to flesh out. Like, why did it take no time for an entire city like this to get built? Why is every government building in almost every fucking country look the same? In every state? Why is it all Greco-Roman style? Why doesn't South Dakota, our Capitol building, look like the Capitol building in the U.S., which looks like the fucking buildings in Rome? Mm-hmm. Why? Why are there pyramids in South America? Why is there South American structures that are built during this same era that are the same style as some of these European buildings? And why are there South American cultures, like indigenous South American cultures, that can understand Hungarian?
Well, that's where, so certainly like where Mormon, right? Mormon history is going to come in, because the idea is that, so we get just very quickly, right? The Mormon story starts, several hundred years before Christ is born. That's where the Book of Mormon starts. And it's about a family in the Middle East that essentially is getting ran out of town, and they build a boat and sail and land in Mesoamerica. So they're Jews.
Obviously, his name was Christopher Columbus.
Exactly.
Is that not how this goes?
He sails the ocean blue in 495 BC.
Yeah.
And so it's they sail and they land in Mesoamerica. Mm-hmm. And ultimately what they end up doing is populating the area, but they're folks that are going to, in more than likely, are speaking Hebrew.
Mm-hmm.
And they're going to then mix with the native peoples that are there.
Well, that's always one of the talks, that the native people were kind of the original chosen people. It's kind of descendants of the chosen people.
Well, the story goes that Jesus is born, but then Jesus dies, and then Jesus comes to these people after he dies. So the story is that after Jesus gets crucified, with those 3 days before he raises back from the dead, right, Mormons are going to tell a story that Jesus goes everywhere.
Yeah.
Jesus goes to those other worlds.
Yeah.
We can't even get into space Jesus. Like space Mormonism.
Space Jesus is cool. Hold on. Now, Mormon transcendentalism, though, I love. I love the Mormon, transcend the thing, because it ties into a lot of things that I think are very cool, in that, all right, now we're done with this realm.
Right.
And I think that's important. I think there is a concept of there that matters. There's flat earthers that believe very much that, no, your goal is to figure this out. Mm-hmm. And that you need to transcend this plane, and the flat earth thing is almost like we're the center of this one thing, but then it goes wider, 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 wider.
Well, what's crazy is that these stories that we hear now, where it's like, so Jesus comes to the people in Middle America or Mesoamerica, right, into Latin America. So those stories of those pyramids, and there was a great white god that comes, and that's where the confusion was of there's this, we have these stories of old, these ancient stories where there was a white god that came, so then when the Europeans come and just decimate everything, they're like, oh,
these
shit,
guys have my trust.
These people were okay, they were okay before. And
these guys were cool last time.
So what's interesting is does the guy that wrote the book, right, does the Book of Mormon, if you're saying Joseph Smith wrote it, did he know all those stories? So there's a lot of things that it's, how would that be so specific? That there was a great white god that showed up, and he's like, oh yeah, that's Jesus. Yeah. Jesus showed up.
Well, and there's always the thing that comes from, especially specifically with the Book of Mormon stuff, is you're attacking an individual, right? There is the attack on Joseph Smith. There's he was kind of by his nature a con artist, and a proven con artist,
and kind of sort of had.
But also, how much of this is hit pieces? Because I see this with everything now. You can't look at anyone who's been attacked for something they believe or say now and be oh, well, if they were actually good people and then made a religion and got millions of people involved, like that there wouldn't be those same pieces written about them. Right. You know what I'm saying? Like everyone who believes anything now and gets a little bit of following, there are hit pieces, and all I see is 200 years worth of hit pieces for everyone that's said anything cool or significant or alternative to the official narrative.
Yeah.
You are demonized in a way that it's like literally made to clown on you. I knew nothing about Mormonism, and my thing was just South Park stuff, what I hear in rumblings, and that's it. Right. I was like, seems weird. I feel like people could just check their history books and be like, well, that's not how this happened. And that's the thing. So I was like, oh, obviously Christopher Columbus did that thing like 700 years later, bro. What are we talking about?
The one thing that does pop in history books is the Oregon Trail. So you talk about like the miners, right? Yeah. So 49ers, right? Folks going out to the gold rush. But then you hear about the Oregon Trail.
Joe Montana.
Jerry Rice. Steve Young, Mormon. Coincidence?
I don't think so.
I think not. Anyway, so you have but you have the Oregon Trail. And so you have all those trails of everybody that was going west at that time, right? Well, there is a Mormon Trail, and that is going to be in most history books.
Yeah.
They talk about the Mormon Trail. So, I mean, talk about the stark contrast. So most folks have heard of the Donner Party.
Yeah.
Right? So the Donner Party, poor bastards, make a left when they should have made a right.
Zigged when they should have zagged. Now it's winter. Now you're fucked.
And now everybody's eating.
I'm hungry. Everyone looks delicious. Let's go.
So take that contrast. And the Oregon Trail, we all had our oxen die.
Yep.
We've all buried our children.
Dysentery.
It's what happened. Contrast that with the Mormons. The Mormons, as they go along that trail, they're not just... Now, did they have hardship and bad shit happen? Totally. But at the same time, they also were...
air conditioning.
It was awful. They were building temples.
Yeah.
Stone temples.
Things that
So this is where that's where like the fun
you
of
need
this.
to get it. This is the thing. People, when you look into these things, you can't just like take the story, right? You need to get into this and this is the thing when people get into this, when you've done building work, construction work, look at some of these temples that were built, some that are said, and no joke, to have not contained a single nail. Right? The entire structure. And you look like, okay, well, this would take 40 years.
Right.
I'm sorry, my town, there's a fucking event center with a restaurant attached to a hotel that took 3 fucking years to build with cranes and fucking hundreds of adults with equipments and cars and fucking power tools. And it doesn't look cool. It's not ornate, but you can party there and have a wedding dance and this kind. You know what I mean? Like this is it. 3 years, and there's turnarounds of like 1 to 2 years on these things. Also, like that's not what you're doing.
Right.
We're going over there.
Yeah, our goal is actually not, and so that's.
And this is why when I started reading into some of that stuff, what it looks to me more like is what they did is they went through and they were claiming these things as you went by.
And what strengthens that argument is why did you stop where you stopped? It doesn't make any sense. The places were like Kirtland, Ohio.
There's no reason.
Or Nauvoo, Illinois. These areas that are like fucking nowhere.
That are like intense and suck in the winter too.
Like
by the
way, swampy, awful.
So if you're gonna make this tremendous temple that would work hundreds, thousands of people to death, you know what I mean? If I'm literally thinking what it takes to make this is
to build the thing.
To build this is madness.
Right.
Like if you think that's how it goes, you have no fucking idea. You never built anything. You just haven't. And so you see how these things are made. Like, well, you're just doing this on your way to something? That's weird.
Right. And now,
like really hard.
Now, they may not have been on their way. They may have thought every time they landed somewhere, like, this is going to be it.
But also, if you've ever been in Illinois or Indiana or Ohio or whatever, like, what you're going to know is if you think this is your spot in, like, September, and you're like, hey, let's start building this thing.
Right.
You're going to know by February, you're like, let's leave everything here. That thing ain't getting finished then. Like, also, you know you're not staying there.
Yeah.
You just know.
And so the Mormons slowly get pushed out, and then they end up in Salt Lake, which was Mexico,
Desolate.
and is a desert.
Yeah.
There's nothing going on there.
Did you see some of the stuff, too, with, like, some of the old maps, like California showing as an island, and that then, like, a lot of Nevada and off into Utah was kind of like this water thing, and there's... I don't know, it's very, very... I'm open to seeing the other versions of these things because of just what I understand of the world and then what I see in some of the parallels within these stories. It's just entertaining enough for me to entertain.
Yeah, and it's the same time that you talked about, like, where we were talking about earlier, where it's like, why did you end up in the Dakotas. Oh, well, my grandparents, they landed around here at the same time. So the same time that folks were just trying not to freeze to death and were burning cow shit.
My fucking ancestors, not even ancestors. This is like three generations, four generations. We're burning cow shit in mud huts to survive the fucking winter. And anyone who had money the next year got the fuck west. And what? There's just a pile of people building colossal temples halfway through.
Yeah.
No. Just no.
Why not? But it's if they had just gone 500 miles west, they could have been building temples too.
Yeah, that's true. So I don't know. It's eye-opening for me to just try to like. So I just looked through as I was like, also this does not mean, and this is the thing that you're at too, because you're no longer Mormon. You're not doing the business. You got a regular dentist.
Well, no, he's still Mormon.
You got a Mormon dentist?
He's
really?
still Mormon.
You fucking serious?
Yep.
Hold on. Hold on. How many Mormon people how many Mormon people have those things covered in your life? You got a Mormon doc. Who else is Mormon?
Not a Mormon doctor, but there weren't any Mormon doctors to choose from.
Okay.
So we have a Mormon dentist. Here's what I'm telling you. It's part of the culture. My wife's thinking about it. No, but the folks that helped me get my job, Mormons.
No shit.
Yep.
See, it's like a fraternity.
It's what it is.
Yeah.
And I will tell you though, that is one of those things. So there are things, right? We leave the Mormon Church ultimately because they're really shitty to the gays. They're super.
Oh yeah,
not okay
John's
with the
super
gays.
gay, by the way.
Obviously. Right. This is why my wife.
By
is
the way,
his
wife who's sitting over there is stoked to hear this news.
Is very excited. This is why Tyler and I came back to the hotel, and then we told my wife if she was going to come with us, she's going to have to film.
I was really hoping Amy wasn't going to be here for this, and now it's going to get weird gay. So anyway, so there were trouble evolving to some modern understandings.
Right. They're shitty to the gays, but it never changed the fact that while the church as a corporation is that way, and I think people can sympathize with this of like it's like the government is shitty, but the people. Right, like Americans themselves.
Yeah, like the guy who lives next door to you, who like works at the fucking city, is not a piece of shit.
That's it.
I mean, he might be.
Well, he might be,
but
you can't overall, right? And that's where for us, it's like the culture, the community, and we were talking about it earlier. They're so solid, especially where we are, and this is where we've talked about this. Like, so where we live is in the Shenandoah Valley in Virginia, and it's like an amazing area of like just farm, rural people. We're outside, a couple hours outside of DC. They're like amazing human beings. So that's why we're always going to stay connected to that community.
Yeah.
Because they're not the fucking assholes that are over in Salt Lake that are like, like gays are we should be shitty to the gays kids. Like, that's cool.
Yeah, that is weird. It's also like a weird axe to grind.
Well, remember,
my whole thing is like, well, it's just weird to like Mormons, be hitting it that hard.
The establishment in Salt Lake didn't allow blacks to be like members of the church till like 30 years after civil rights.
But they're not the chosen ones who came over on the thing.
No, much worse. In fact, the black people have the mark of Cain.
Can you choose?
Like, they're way worse.
That is always,
like,
so there's
worse.
actually a very interesting thing that goes back from the Mormon. I don't understand this deviation as far as the Mormon understanding, but literally the deviation from Cain and Abel, like that thing in that bloodline, is a thing that I think is more entrenched in the conspiracy. That covers a lot of layers in conspiracy land. It's really cool.
So for the Mormons,
I mean, not cool.
It's super dope, guys.
Super cool.
So what we're saying is the Aryan Nation. The Mormons do it because the Mormons do. It's the same story, right? But just different players. So now we're in the Americas. The good guys are called the Nephites. Mm-hmm. They're white. I shit you not. The bad guys are the Lamanites.
And they're just anyone who doesn't look like us.
No, they're dark. Specifically.
Yeah.
And they all used to be white. It was the bad brother who was named Laman and Lemuel, who were kind of shitbags, which at the end of the day, when you're kind of reading the stories, you're like, hey, so their dad's saying that they should sell like all the shit that they own, and they should sail somewhere that they've never been, and that's everyone should be okay with that. And Laman and Lemuel are like, hey, I'm not super hip on that, Dad.
And then they're like,
well, Dad, why are we going to do that? Well, because the man in the sky told me, boys, that this is what we need to do.
They were like, no.
No, like, we should stay here.
They're like, you are cursed forever.
And
we will mark you.
Dark.
With a tan.
That's it.
So, fuck, dude. Tan me up.
Tan me up, man.
There's I'm gonna butcher this because I don't. Cain and Abel were Adam and Eve's sons. Is that correct in the
Right.
Bible? Right.
Right.
Help me out here. Oh, fuck. 12 years of Catholic
So
school.
what's super dope-
I rebelled pretty intensely against literally just listening to it.
Yeah.
For no reason, just because I didn't like anything. If they were gonna tell me the sky was blue, I was gonna argue. But the interesting thing that I've seen, and I probably will mess this up, was that which one is bad? Cain.
Cain,
Right.
yep.
Was that actually that Cain was like from? So when they talk about the fruit of the knowledge of good and evil, that,
Right.
the serpent came out and presented the fruit, and that Eve took the fruit.
Right.
That was some sort of like sexual thing, and that of the brothers, actually, it was that like Abel was Adam's son, and Cain was the serpent's son.
Oh, that's dope.
And then so that also comes down to when you hear some of these theories about like aliens coming down and or Nephilim or whatever that come and like introducing their genetics to us to maybe give consciousness or whatever. So maybe that's where the origin story comes from, is that's the difference between the two.
So
Fucking Adam just got cucked in his own garden. Like, fuck, man. Like, now I gotta raise this motherfucker?
not today.
Not today. Not
Satan.
today.
One other topic you and I talk about a lot, and this ties into this too. So one cool thing that there's a similarity or that gets compared to. So Cain and Abel. Cain was a forager, right? So they get cast out.
Yeah.
And the difference between the two boys was that Abel was really into agriculture and farming. So the idea was that he was established. Like, you stay where I'm at, I'm going to grow, while Cain was
A wanderer.
a wanderer.
Yeah.
And so it was like the challenge between folks that wanted to sit and farm and homestead to the folks that wanted to be able to move with the animals or move where the food was. And so you have this stark contrast between these two civilizations, and one just couldn't live without the other.
It's also difficult to tell sometimes too, when so many of these allegories are written just to kind of, what's the word, like,
It was all so many metaphors.
yeah,
that
that's the
kinda
thing,
do
is
it.
like, is this meant to be metaphor because you want, though you're trying to encourage cohesiveness, so much like all the things about we need a family, we need to breed a lot. Well, that's better for you. Like, there's a reason fucking like Irish Catholic people have a dozen kids.
Mm-hmm.
And that the church encourages it. Why? Because a dozen Catholic people that each have a dozen kids, you're a few generations away from owning an area if you're the Catholic
100%.
Church. Right?
One thing that I don't think enough people are talking about, though, is that so Cain and Abel were born, and they were boys, right? And they were Adam and Eve's only children, according to the Bible.
Was that it, though? I'm not sure that that's
According
implied.
to the Bible, yes.
I don't know
The
that
Book
that's
of
just
Mo-
implied.
Well,
That there weren't more.
I just love the fact that the idea is that they are
That
our
all
first
like,
parents,
dicked
and then
on
they
mom.
all fuck their mom.
Yeah, the truth is I don't know the thing. My thing that I thought I had seen about at some point, which is like an uninformed, not a really informed, comment, but like, was that those two were talked about, and that there were maybe others that weren't. But I don't know. But the other issue is they talked about everybody at stupid, long, boring lengths in
How
fucking,
old they were.
yeah,
Like
and
tons
just,
of
live
shit.
to be 800 and all stuff. So I was like, there's a lot of people I don't give a fuck about who they said
Right.
a lot of things about, like information I didn't need to know. And they're just like, well, who are these people fucking? And they're like, don't ask. Maybe definitely don't ask then, for sure.
So definitely was the mom.
But I have no idea. But that's also the move. Is it also that maybe those two were the only two? So when you go into the Cain and Abel, say the call it like the Prometheus, the movie Prometheus, where like the engineers come down and they just seed, not with life that way, but maybe directly.
Yep.
Like you give a few Neanderthals the fucking gift of consciousness and alien brains,
right?
And that there maybe was a bunch of us dummies running around,
right?
And that there was Adam and there was Eve, and then there was some fucking alien snake dude comes in and is like, hey, you want some magic space dick? And she's like, all right. And then now you got real human conscious stuff, and then Cain and his kids were just banging around with whatever was else already there.
Yeah, the Mormons do take it a step further. In one of their later books, they redo. Well, obviously.
No, it's the Mormon
I've
space.
told you
the space
like
dick
I told you there's a big
Chronicles.
space
That's right,
section
that's
of it.
right.
We don't have time today, but
God.
Mormon space
I think
dick.
this is my jam, dude. I don't. What do we have? Why has anyone? We're going back. John's going back. You all right with that? It's going back. We're going back.
We're converting together.
Yeah, we're going
You're
back.
getting a dog. You're gonna be
get a
on a
dog.
farm, and then we're converting to Mormonism.
Well, I think so. Guys, I want you to just look into a few concepts, though, as like a listener. I want you to look into. You're gonna have to look. It's a mess of fucking misinformation. You need to look in some of the holes in history. So you need to look in the the concepts that in the 1800s specifically, as though we wandered in, give or take, to like repopulate, especially a lot of America.
Yeah.
And that I think Europe maybe happened a little bit sooner.
Totally.
But that there was a big cataclysm, maybe multiples, maybe those things are cyclical, as though a reset, be a flood, mud flood. Some will say it's like a meltdown via some of the energy in the ether that they drew. You know, there's a whole thing that this goes really, really deep with. But look into those things because it's fucking interesting. So terms to look up: orphan trains, Tartaria, mud flood, Tartarian meltdown. You have to take the good with the bad with this stuff because it's all over the place. It really is. Even the one thing I sent you is you got to like, it sucks.
Well, that one video, the kid went from like, he had 37 topics.
Yeah.
But
it's crazy.
But the fact was like, so I sent it to one of my friends who it was LDS, right, Latter-day Saint. That's another nickname for Mormon. So it was Mormon forever. Like just recently left the church. And so he's a scientist.
I've never taken LDS, but I'm looking forward to
it. Be careful. That space dick. But he's
I do lots of drugs. I've never taken LDS.
It's amazing. This is crazy. But I showed him the video. He just sent me like the mind blown emoji.
Well,
he's
good.
like,
So
whoa.
this is why I like this. So because as somebody who
and he's like an evolutionary biologist, so he's no fucking around. Like he works for a government agency.
Yeah.
I'm not going to tell you which one.
The Central Intelligent one. Anyway, go ahead.
But he works for and he was like mind blown.
In Virginia, huh?
Yeah, we're in Virginia. So we're but he was like he's mind blown, and he loved the idea because ultimately it is, especially when you've left. I think it's easier if you've left like a really an area where you have been programmed, right?
You're willing to think alternatively.
Yeah, if you're willing to step away, kind of everything is kind of open.
But I think it's probably also weird for you, even in him, to like if you leave the thing that you know is pitched as alternative, you had to like rally in defense of that for a long time.
Totally.
And then but your only choice then is to what? Jump immediately to the mainstream narrative, right? So if you leave the Mormon church, it's oftentimes, I don't know, maybe I'm just projecting, but it would be if you're going to leave it, at least on the history side of things, it'd be like, yeah, fucking duh, Columbus, 1492, bro. What are we talking about?
No, what ends up actually happening from what we see is as folks leave, what's a shame, right? And this ultimately is a shame for people that have, it's the spiral out of control. No, they end up leaving religion altogether.
Yeah.
So they end up becoming atheists.
Yeah.
And
which happens, I think, in everything. That was my move.
Right.
I was like not ever. I mean, I was resistant to Christianity the entire time, and so my move was not like it was like we've talked about with Andy on this show. It was like militant atheism. It's almost uninteresting and boring.
And it's as equally uninteresting.
It's as dogmatic as anything else.
Absolutely.
Oh, you see a thing? You hear it? You believe a thing? No.
And
well, wait a minute. That's not what
like,
we're doing.
like, hold on, and that's where like so it's interesting to watch. He and I have ran parallel without actually talking to each other about these things for years, but it's like they can kind of fall into this weird like Buddhism type soup thing where you're kind of like open to whatever,
which it should be.
And but it makes it interesting. So while somebody that is like got a PhD and has all these things, where all of a sudden he gets exposed to where the video that you sent me, he's like, all right. Cool. He goes, and tell your friend that the reason why we have deep tunnels in all the temples is for the cocaine and dead hookers.
I dig it.
I
dig it.
He's gonna like that.
And so, but it's really interesting. And so, like, I don't know. I'm gonna move on from this thing because you guys have your research to do. But John's done another thing that I really, really wish I had the wherewithal to do. And John and Amy and their family have been slowly transitioning to like what's the word? Self-sustaining. Maybe it's like often
compound.
Self-sustaining compound, much like we talk about was the conspiracy Randy commune or whatever. John and Amy are doing it, but it's going to be less creepy and with less drugs and probably
not as much forced peanut butter consumption, right?
But I think you guys have started, and it's kind of like I know you pretty well, so you guys have started essentially like, growing a lot of your own food and trying to get as much of your needs taken care of within yourselves and your immediate community.
Totally.
And as off the grid, as transition off the grid as possible. But this is a process. This isn't a thing you can just do. No,
and that was the one thing we talked about earlier of like homesteading and all these different phrases and things like that of like where we want to get off. Like we are like the tiny house type people.
Yeah.
I'm not the size of a tiny house type person.
No.
But the fact is that it was the idea of you don't owe anybody any money. You have an area that's yours. You have kind of the space that doesn't more than is what is needed is kind of is useless, but also it really hit the fan when my wife said I needed to buy ammo.
Yeah.
She's not pro guns in any way. She'll tolerate lots of the things that I do, which.
But when the logic hits, where it's like, okay.
But that was it. Food scarcity
Was that COVID?
what it was COVID.
Yeah.
So as COVID was knocking on the door,
like, distrust in everything.
And that's where, and we're not preppers, right? And that's talking about Mormonism and prepper. That's a whole nother rabbit hole you can go down. But it was nothing that we ever we didn't dive super far into that.
Hold on.
But
Mormonism and preppers, though, would work very well if there is a underlying understanding that society resets, that it is a requirement, not even a biblical one, but maybe human nature.
It is
that
taught,
we all coalesce into a thing and then collapse. Therefore, I think prepping is a thing that probably does make sense.
It is taught from the pulpit that you should have a 72-hour kit or more food at any time, always. That's on your property.
I would say 35 days.
Like it's
Anyway, okay, so
anyway, but staying on this topic, it is the one thing that we realized is like we're very much a partnership of the things that we do, my wife and I. And for her thing, it's very much like she makes sure that she hits, like she's going grocery stores, she's taking care of all the things so that I can take care of everything else. She takes care of all those things. And she said, food is getting more expensive. And this was like December, November, before everything kind of hit. And she's like, everything's getting more expensive. Something's happening. Yeah. And I don't know what it is. And this was like when shit was going down on the far west of the U.S. with COVID, and it hadn't hit where we were. And everyone else kind of, it was like, it's no big deal, whatever.
Like, I haven't watched my TV yet, so I'm okay.
Yeah, we'll be okay. And I remember we were like, I think we need to, like, we had been talking about doing chickens. We've been talking about doing X, Y, and Z. And she's like, I think we need to do that. And also, like, we're now hearing stories now, like, fast forward a few months, we're now hearing stories of where, like, the supply lines are getting shut down.
Yeah.
So, like, farmers are having to either dump milk.
Do you remember that, though, when COVID first started? I remember talking about this, like, maybe 2 months in on the Strong Fit podcast, when I was like, I think this is hanging on. But they kept pushing shit out. And I even kind of latched onto this one a little bit. They were pitching, like, food shortages and supply shortages within 1 to 2 weeks, like, impending in like, the third month of the lockdown, like, by June of 2020. And I was like, oh, shit. But it never fucking happened. So this is what are you talking about? You're predicting this? If you're saying it's going to happen in 2 weeks and it doesn't happen. So I still believe that some sort of food shortage is like practically going to be engineered, and that last thing when they were talking about this a year ago was one of those like fear tests. Like when they did clowns and shit or whatever, where fucking like people are injecting AIDS blood into the bananas at the store. None of that was real. And it was just like, how stupid are these people going to latch onto it? I don't think enough people ran with the food shortage thing, because if they would have, what would have happened? Everyone would have gone and bought. And if everybody bought, what happens the next week? A food shortage. Even though if everybody goes every day,
everybody didn't go fucking buy food. They went and bought goddamn toilet paper.
Yeah, listen.
But I would be interested in looking back. Obviously that's important, but that's why they have bidets, man. But they no, I would be interested to look at the timing of when they were announcing the food shortage concepts and when all the Black Lives Matter riots and cities started to get burned down.
June. Yeah,
it was close. And and the reality was, when things started getting sketchy, that's when she's like, maybe we should buy some more bullets for the guns. And it was because only for the sheer thought of like, when food is no longer available, that's when shit gets real really quick. Yeah. Because look at like the French Revolution, it was just because the people ran out of goddamn food. And it's like, so heads are going to start getting cut off.
That'll like Rage Against Machines. So it's like, hungry people don't stay hungry for very long.
Exactly.
They don't.
And
you're going to die or you're going to get it. But you ain't going to sit there and just be hungry. That ain't going to happen.
And so that's what really motivated us to kind of take the jump. Because there's so much, you're like, oh, well, I don't know what to do. And I don't even know where to get it. And I don't do this. But we started with chickens and we started with a few.
Well, and it's also, people will be like, oh, geez, what are you getting, like a dozen eggs a week or something like this? Or whatever it is. Like, well, how much is that really? The point that I've said this to you many times, and I'm envious of John's move with this because, and I told John and Amy earlier, it's not because I want to live like that, by the way. That's not in me. It's not. I'm a lazy person. Right. I like a life in which I can be taken around, I can party, and I can socially get the fuck out when I don't want to be in a social situation, but I want my life to be interesting and fun. And I don't like work. I'm not like an earthy guy I'm just not.
Right.
It's just, I don't know. That doesn't appeal to me. but I also see things, and I do think I see things pretty accurately. And I think that those skills, the ability to raise your own food, and I think animal husbandry and being able to raise and care for animals for the sake of whether it's milk or meat or otherwise, and I think hunting and wild game, I think I think those are skills that are going to become increasingly more valuable over the course of the next 5 years. Much more than valuing, I think, faith in the current financial structures.
Yeah.
I think literally the dollar. I think all currency is fucked. I think I'm not trying to be all doom and gloom. I just don't see things. I don't see a system that can be turned around. I think matter of fact, I think the best thing for the system is to collapse quickly and intensely, and then go. So I see this stuff happening. I was like, fuck me. And I know that I don't want to live like that, but I wish I had those skills, which is why you did it exactly right? You're like, all right, I'm going to get some animals and I'm going to start growing some shit. And Amy's done, where she's like, you're going out and you find there's so many Facebook groups and forums and things like this out there where you guys can find like, all right, well, if my peas are fucking look like this, what do I do? They're like, well, pick them now. They're done. They're ready to go.
Yeah, you're not alone, and that's one of the things that I felt like, and Amy and I have talked about this a lot on our podcast before. But it's
what's the podcast called?
It's called the It's Possible podcast.
Possible podcast. So I'll put it in the link in the bottom.
There you go.
It's also you can find It's Possible Virtual Solutions on Instagram.
Yeah, It's Possible VS.
VS on Instagram.
Yeah,
fuck.
I know. I apologize.
Listen, that was before the podcast course.
This is
We're gonna
way
be all right.
before the podcast course. Way before. But it's one of the things we've talked about a lot is the idea where it's you don't sit around. We're not alone.
Yeah.
And COVID and a lot of the media or a lot of the things that we're hearing is making you feel like you're isolated. Mm-hmm. We're being, man, it's conspiracy Randy. We can use conspiracy related language. We're being programmed to feel like we're so different.
Yep.
From one another,
Yeah.
Black or white or
People
rich or
around
poor,
you
or
are
whatever
the
it
enemy,
is.
and it's this continued fragmentation. First, what's the big line? Are you scared of COVID or are you not?
Right.
Are you going to wear a mask or are you not? Are you going to get vaccinated or you're not? Okay, now we're going to take those things and we're also going to cross-sect everything. Are you pro Black Lives Matter or not?
Are you black or white? Right.
Well, what about say the name? Are you pro Black Lives Mattering? Yes.
Do you like
Are
cops?
you pro Black Lives Matter the movement? Are you pro Black Lives Matter stealing Target and looting fucking businesses? But like all of those things continue to further fragment these things, and it's meant to just keep you into your very isolated box. Everybody has their terms. And I was like, okay, I am a white cisgender male, they, or you know what I'm saying? Like everything is this constant identifiable thing. Mm-hmm. And so it boils you down into I am only this category, and I don't see so many people in my category in my life.
And the fact is, if you wipe all of that clean, get rid of all media except for Conspiracy Randy and It's Possible podcast.
Yeah, that's it. Those two.
You get rid of everything and you just interact with human beings. You'd be like, oh, like these people are quite pleasant. Mm-hmm. And in fact, they're quite similar. And the one thing that has been nice about getting into this movement is that we were I am the do first, ask questions later person.
Yeah.
My wife, thank God, is the opposite of that.
Which is why your chickens are still alive.
But it also is one of those things. But it's important because it's for Amy. It was, I'm super nervous about doing this, and so we were really hesitant. But
so she'll come in and constantly prepare,
and then we found there are communities that are here. There are people that can help us. There are people that can support. And what we found is that even though we're in this one spot, you have this entire community that can help you every step of the way. So that's where I would encourage anybody that has been thinking about doing this, because this is where you brought it up a minute ago, which was the idea of, well, okay, like I can buy eggs for 89 cents a dozen.
Yeah, is that worth the work? By the way, mathematically speaking, it's not worth the work.
It's not even fucking close.
Not even close.
You're going to spend way more money to do this, but here's the facts. The facts is that between our garden and our chickens that we have, if food prices, right, I couldn't tell you how much eggs cost because we don't buy eggs.
Yeah.
And the fact is that my eggs are 55 steps from my back door of my house.
Yeah.
They're not at a store. They're not at a store.
At a store that's on fire because everybody else is hungry.
Or whatever it is. And that's where we realize it's like, I couldn't tell you how much a gallon of, like, if we really wanted to be strict about it, we couldn't tell you how much a gallon of milk costs at a store, because we don't. We get it directly from a farmer. We don't go through a middleman.
And I think that's the important move. Is people are like, well, geez, if I have to personally create everything, it's like, well, that's not how this works.
Right.
You need a community, meaning you can provide a lot of the things that you can do within your current skill set, and then you can always trade to somebody who does the other stuff better. And that's how it works. Because you're never going to do this on your own, by the way. Never, never, never.
It was never supposed.
Do you know how many cows, goats, to do all of it on your own? And then what if you need something like so you need to just do what you can. I think what you guys have done, though, and it's a thing I apply to almost everything. Same thing with podcasting, right? When I started my first podcast, I was like, this was 6 years ago now? 6 years ago for Massonomics? Whatever, 5-6 years ago. We're like, shit, man, I really wish we would have started. If we'd have started 3 years ago, this is what I was saying then. If we would have started 3 years ago, we'd be doing it in a real good place now.
Right.
And I literally was like, well, I guess let's just do it. And I guess in a few years from now, we'll see.
That's it.
And it still is going that way. Everyone I've started since then is like, well, shit, I always thought that it was going to dry up. And so the point is to just get in and start playing the game, because like you need the skills. But it's also funny for you and I, all of our business is like online, not real business. I mean, it's real business, but it's not like,
but totally,
it's not like needs based. Like it's not fundamental needs based, which means if the electricity goes out,
right?
If the power grid takes 3 months off, you and I are not making any money, but neither is anyone else.
It's quite a few levels of Maslow's hierarchy of needs of where we live.
Yeah. I'm not. Yeah,
right.
The podcast business is not going to be a very thriving one when the fucking power grid goes down or whatever,
right? Or
when meat's fucking $100 a pound. But I think. So the point is this, by the way, it's like, guys, don't get into raising chickens or doing a farm or whatever, or doing, growing a bunch of shit. And I think you should still go big if you're going to do it with the gardening and stuff. 'Cause there's a lot of stuff you can do. It's not expensive. So I think for taking on those types of things, like you have to learn canning. You need trial and error. You have to learn how to fucking cure it. You have to make your food last. You're going to learn what you can and can't trade. You're going to fuck up so much stuff. You know what I mean? You're just going to, like, you need to do that trial and error period right now, because otherwise when the time comes, you're going to be doing a lot of error when it matters.
Yeah.
When you can't go get eggs for 59 cents a dozen or whatever it is.
Right. And the fact is that these skills that we're talking about, where like my wife has perfected she knows how to can.
Yeah.
Right. She knows how to do certain things that she didn't know how to do 15 years ago when we got married.
Yeah.
But the reason why it was a little bit at a time as we learned. It's kind of like, I kind of want to learn. But the fact is that she had to learn those things. That's not shit that was, now it's kind of like, why are you learning all that?
Yeah.
That was just knowledge that used to get passed down from grandparents.
Well, this is the thing that I want to kind of maybe end on, is that, like, we didn't have to do it because there was no problem.
Right.
Every single person's, all of you, your grandparents, if you're listening and you're over the age of 25, like, your grandparents know how to run a garden, they know how to can, and they probably, if they don't, their parents certainly do,
totally
know their way around some sort of animal, one way or another. Why? Because they fucking had to. And if they didn't need to, it was a skill that needed to be had because society was maybe more, like precariously perched on the ground that it's perched. And so I just think that if society is not on solid ground, these skills are very valuable. So I just think people need to start with those skills. But going back to even with the old world history and lost civilizations or whatever, I encourage you. So for me, my understanding, literally what I described to you with my family coming, that's all I ever know, because my grandparents have told me this brief story in passing.
Right.
They got on a train and headed west, and then they got off when they ran out of money and walked north until they were giving away, homesteads, quarter acre, whatever, right? You get a quarter of land, and that was, but that's all I know of this. So, like, I need to, while they're still alive, and I encourage all of you to do this. Mm-hmm. There's a lot to be had as far as, like, don't take the government's version. What do your grandparents say? Mm-hmm. And then, like, ignore how that fits in with your school telling you with what history was, and think of it with more of an open book. Like, why were they here by themselves? How old were they? 16? That's weird. Where were their parents? Why were there so many orphans in the 1800s? Why? I don't know this. Why? Your parents, your grandparents, your grandparents. So I think I'm lucky. All of my grandparents are still alive, and that's not going to be the case for very long. But for those of you that have people, I think you really need to like hear those stories, and I think that it's I don't know. It's fucking really, really, really interesting, like to hear their version of history. And I've talked about this all the time, school and indoctrination, how much all that sucks, and that like we don't have like passed down stories, origin stories anymore. You will laugh at your grandpa or like your great grandfather for what he thought happened back then. Like, oh, he believes this or this. Like, it's obvious that it, like people will literally choose the school version of history over your grandfather or great grandfather's version.
And there's
and
so
who
much.
the fuck are you,
Right.
you to decide that? And it's like, at least take his fucking word for it, and then like figure out somewhere in the middle, or like respect where they're coming from. So I encourage everybody, one, get your fucking hands on some of those skills. My great grandfathers, both of them had farms, and like and I know if I had to go through an undertaking like what you're doing now, like with that stuff, it would be really nice to have him around.
Totally.
To be like, what am I doing here? And literally he would know the amount of things from fencing and latching to like moving livestock from one space to another. Mm-hmm. There's all these wild little tricks in feeding and spreading. Like there's so much of this stuff that goes on in handling just livestock.
Yeah.
That is like will be gone if you don't take on it at some point in your life, and then like your kids are going to be more useless than you are.
Yeah.
And is that what you want, by the way? If you trust society to continue to improve at the rate that it's been improving at, which we seem to be doing a great job these last few years,
fabulous,
I think, then fine. But if you don't, then your kids will be much less equipped than even your dumb city ass is going to be at this moment if you don't figure it out now and then teach them.
Yeah, the fact
Nobody's going to teach your kids for you how to do this shit.
No. And the
Hunger
fact is,
might.
Yeah, well, that's usually the big motivator, right? And the fact is that we were able to do what we did with our chickens because we had friends in our neighborhood who did chickens 2 years before us.
Gotcha.
So the fact is, we're like, hey, we want to do this. Well, guess what? We had people that were right there, essentially the equivalent of having family members that were nearby. So we have 3 families in this highly residential neighborhood. So that's what one of the excuses you hear a lot of is like, I can't do that. Like I live in fill in the blank.
Talk to your neighbors.
I live wherever. Yeah. You can do it. And one cool thing as we got into this is that there's so much history, and you're talking about like get the history from people that were alive, get that first person narrative of that history. There's so much history that's out there. As we all have learned, like whatever the government has given you is hilariously not going to be the only history that's available. As we got into this world of like the homesteading and everything, like the government, Uncle Sam, like literally
is in
cartoons.
the way of this.
Well, cartoons of Uncle Sam back in World War I. When it was like, we can't feed you all eggs, we can't feed you food because we need to go feed the troops. Yeah, because we were in a position.
Learn to feed yourself because it's good for America.
So what did they say for good for America? Every person needed to have 2 chickens, and if you weren't doing your part for the war.
Yeah, yeah.
He didn't say get 2 chickens because you live in a rural community and it's comfortable. It's like no, like it doesn't matter where the fuck you live.
Yeah, if we got to feed you, we can't feed the people that we're
like taking over the world with. So it's like, get 2 chickens. And it's amazing. That history of sure as shit was never taught.
Yeah.
Not to me in school. That it's like, what do you mean? Like, I live by the beach, or I live in a city, or I live in an apartment. How can I have 2 chickens? It's like, you can have 2 chickens.
Yeah.
If you can have a parrot, you can have a chicken. And here's the difference. The chicken gives you food.
Yeah.
So, it's...
Do parrots lay eggs?
No, definitely live birth like sharks.
Hang on. Do all birds lay eggs, right?
Yeah, I would assume so.
Do they lay them all the time, though? Or do they only lay? Do some birds only lay when they're like fertilized? Like chickens just lay.
They lay.
But like, help me out here. I'm fucking stupid.
Wow.
You know what I'm saying?
We got to Google.
I bet not.
If you have, it couldn't be, right? There's no way it couldn't be.
Couldn't be.
Because otherwise, if you have a parrot, you'd have parrot eggs all the time.
Yeah, there'd just be
How
parrots
delicious
everywhere.
would parrot eggs
Well, this
be?
is what we're talking about.
That seems like very exotic.
I think you
eggs.
could get 2 parrots. No, because then they wouldn't be just an egg. It'd be like a fertilized egg, and then there would
right.
be a parrot.
No, that's
in it.
and see, listen, that sounds like you dumb fuck. It's like no, like when we got chickens, there was a lot of learning, like to the point for us for learning, be like, how do the eggs come out? Yeah. Like where do the eggs come from? If you don't have a rooster,
I gotta reach in there and get it?
What is happening?
Honey, you hold the legs. What happens with parrot eggs? What do you got?
2 to 4 eggs about once a year
In the wild,
In the
but
wild.
I bet not in. Oh, okay.
They're not consistent layers.
Okay. You gotta ruffle the feathers a little bit if you want the parrot.
If you want the parrot eggs,
you gotta ruffle the
how
feathers.
come people that have parrots are not talking about these parrot eggs?
What is the deal with these 2 to 4 eggs? So they're definitely not in captivity. Then they're just not producing these eggs.
It can't be.
All right. So guys, if you got a parrot, I'd like you to have sex with it and see what happens.
If there is no mate present,
If there's no mate present,
parrots
nothing.
won't lay eggs at all.
Yeah.
How
All right.
about that? That's efficiency.
Yeah. Well,
Son of a bitch.
take notes. Guys, I think it's got us wrapped up. John, thanks a lot for joining us. I got to send you guys some places here. First off, I want you to go to spacesfake.com. John's sporting the Rampage shirt. Looks
personal
great,
favorite.
fits great. They're fucking tremendous. By the way, they wash really, really well. Like and the print, this wash is fantastic. Like I really, really.
This has
really
been
like the
washed
shirt.
several times at this point.
Yeah. So love the shirt. Spacesfake.com. Shop the Conspiracy Randy collection. Also go to shopnetty.com. Use code Randy at checkout for 10% off. Follow me at Tyler F. and Stone. You can follow Andy at Skinny Idiot Studios. Jesus Christ.
You got it.
Follow the show at Conspiracy Randy on Instagram and TikTok. John, how can they find you?
You can find me at J Banks FL, as in Florida. J Banks FL.
And the show?
Is It's Possible VS.
And the podcast is really, by the way, my wife has started from the beginning.
That's so dangerous.
No. From the very beginning. She's down to, I think she's got like 15 episodes left.
Man, she's flying.
Well, she's also like, no, because some of the first episodes were shorter.
That's
right?
true.
So she's like, all right, now these are going to take longer. Because some of the episodes now are like an hour or so.
Yeah.
And so, but she just loves it. Because knowing also where kind of things have gone from there, it's a really great thing. I never will advise for somebody on their behalf that you start at the beginning of their show. But I think you should start, because it was just embarrassing always.
It's terrible.
Don't ever listen to the first 10 episodes of anything I've ever done.
No.
But it's good because it's talk like these things and family and business and the two and so it's a whole thing, and I think it's really, really, really cool what you guys are doing.
I dig that.
And I think so check out It's Possible Virtual Solutions and It's Possible VS on Instagram. The other thing is John and I do all sorts of shit. We don't have like a ton of room, I think, at the moment for like things. Things are busy.
It depends on how much money you have.
Yeah, that's true. This is the truth. If you're trying to do it, the truth is though, if you're trying to do anything for cheap, like we just don't have room for it at the moment. We're busy, but we do stuff with podcasts and management and businesses and product and online stuff and launches. If there's those types of things you got some scratch you want to put to it, doing like the cool guy way. We don't do business. We're up here, by the way. We're in Stamford, Connecticut, for a client of ours who's a friend. We don't work for just people. That's the move.
That is true.
So we come up here and it's like, fucking hell yeah. Oh shit, thanks for coming. It was so nice to come here. There's space. They have a big event that they've been putting on.
Right.
And so it's been really, really cool to see, and we want to see his things work. And we want to see the success and stuff. So it's like the way we do business. So I'm not gonna do like if you're selling fucking, I don't know, if you make widgets and sell widgets, like I just might not care. It's the truth. I just have a hard time. But so if you come in, if you have an idea or a project or something you're doing, or you need whatever, and John and I seem to be the types of personalities that you want to do that type of business with, just let us know. Shoot me a message or shoot John a message, and we can get on and chat about it. But
The Bearded Sons.
The Bearded Sons. It was great. We had a guy we were on a call with the other day. He's like, yeah, I think you guys have become my bearded sons.
My adopted bearded sons.
Yeah.
Like, thank you, sir.
Yeah. So, but anyway, guys, thanks a lot for listening. I think I've got all our bases covered.
You're the man.
And so cheers from the East Coast. And John, we'll hope to see you again soon.
Indubitably.
Only way to match the pictures of my mind. 8 millimeter, no sound. Damn, if you didn't know, then you know now. 8 millimeter, no sound. Damn, if you didn't know, then you know now. Damn, if you didn't know, then you know now. Damn, if you didn't know, then you know now.
Do not change the volume. Do not change the volume.
And I was like, hey, no rush.